It took 6 months for Armando Sosa to build his first loom, and he did it using only his childhood memories as a guide. He was inspired by a desire to honor his ancestors and his roots in Guatemala, and that, he says, made the seemingly daunting task of building a loom with no direction rather easy.
You know, when you have a dream and you want to do something and you really work on, you really can do it.
Armando grew up in the highlands of Guatemala, in a small town where in the 1950s more than 90% of the men were weavers. It was a trade he learned as a child. Armando was just 8 when he began spinning and dyeing thread, and 15 when he started weaving. He remembers watching his grandfather and father standing at their looms day in and day out, doing work Armando can only describe as hard.
To make a piece to sell in the market almost every day, we have to spend between 8 or 10 hours every day to make a piece almost like 6 yards long. And I was making 50 cents per day.
As a teen, he began traveling and exhibiting Guatemalan weaving internationally. He remembers during one trip to the U.S., spotting a woven piece in the window of a store in downtown Pittsburgh.
It was very, very small, maybe like 3 feet by maybe 2. And it doesn't look like so complex, but it looks beautiful. And maybe because the place where it was, I saw the price, $3,000 and something. Wow, I said, that's a lot of money for something like that.
It was then, he says, he realized his craft was art, worth a lot more than 50 cents a day. Years later, in 1993, just after immigrating to the United States, for the chance to make more money for his wife and children back in Guatemala, Armando says he started getting an urge to weave. It had been years since he'd made a textile, but he hadn't forgotten the weaving he'd seen in the shop window. Before long, he says the desire to create art that would honor his family's hard work was inescapable.
We were living in a place that we were close to a hardware store here in Hopewell. And my hands were like itching every time that I was passing by, looking all that wood, and say, I have to make that loom. I couldn't even believe it when it was up, and you know, especially when I was putting the threads already in the loom. And when I was starting weaving, and I said, wow, it really works. So it was very, very exciting.
Armando has since built 4 more looms. This one at the Highland Studios in Hopewell, New Jersey, which is owned by his artistic champion and partner Karen McLean, is his 3rd. Here he creates decorative pieces, usually 3 feet by 6 feet long, using bright and vivid color combinations with shimmering metallics and traditional motifs from various cultures. He says in his works he's literally weaving together his memories and his dreams, and each piece can take him around 100 hours to complete, sometimes more.
For me, weaving is like a connection with that past. It reminds me when I was very little, being at the house of my grandparents is like that I can see them, you know, like hearing them, like they were whistling and working and all that. So it's a nice connection for me.
Today, at age 61, Armando is considered a master weaver. His works are in the collections of the Newark Museum, the Princeton Library, Johnson & Johnson World Headquarters, the Capitol Health Building in Pennington, and the U.S. government has even given him the distinction of Artist of Exceptional Ability, a title that makes Armando blush.
I think I'm just a weaver, you know.
It's been more than 20 years since Armando came to the U.S., and though he's still awaiting permanent status, he says he wishes he could show his parents and grandparents, especially his grandfather, the life he's made here. He wishes his grandfather could see his weavings and how they've changed, becoming more abstract over the years, more and more inspired by his memories. But in reality, Armando says, all he can do is keep weaving, and through that, keep their craft alive.
I hope I have a lot more years. There's always so much new that you can create. Is what I say.